Michael Carter had spent years chasing a dream that once felt so far out of reach, owning a beautiful house with a private pool in an upscale neighborhood of Atlanta. As a former police officer, he had worked tirelessly, saving every dollar he could, sacrificing luxuries, and pushing himself beyond limits to turn this dream into reality. And now, standing in front of his newly purchased home, he could hardly believe it. The elegant white facade, the large glass windows reflecting the golden sunset, and the sparkling blue pool in the backyard, it was all his. Stepping inside, Michael took a deep breath, letting the warmth of accomplishment fill his chest. He ran his fingers along the smooth wooden railing of the staircase, feeling the solid proof of his hard work beneath his touch. The house was more than just a place to live, it was a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that years of dedication and determination had finally paid off. That evening, he made himself a cup of coffee and walked out onto the patio, gazing at the pool where the water rippled gently in the breeze. He could already picture himself spending peaceful mornings here, reading the newspaper, or enjoying quiet evenings under the soft glow of the garden lights. A smile slowly spread across his face. This was the life he had dreamed of. As he sat down, letting the cool night air brush against his skin, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The struggles, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, they all led to this. He had proven to himself that no matter how impossible a dream might seem, with enough determination and effort, it could become a reality. And at this moment, as he took in the beauty of his new home, he knew one thing for certain: he had finally made it. Michael had barely settled into his new home when he encountered his first problem, his neighbor, Karen. She was a middle-aged woman with short, overly styled blonde hair, and an expression that always seemed disapproving. From the moment he moved in, she had made her presence known, watching his every move like a self-appointed neighborhood officer. The first issue arose when Michael parked his car in front of his own house. Not even an hour had passed before Karen knocked on his door, arms crossed, her lips pursed in irritation. "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with fake politeness. "But we have rules in this neighborhood. You can't just park wherever you want. It ruins the aesthetic." Michael raised an eyebrow. "It's my driveway," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Still, she huffed. "We like to keep things looking neat around here." That was just the beginning. Karen had complaints about everything: his music, which he barely played, his choice of garden plants, those aren't native to this area, she informed him, and even the way he watered his lawn. One evening, as Michael was enjoying a peaceful moment by his pool, Karen popped up at the fence, arms resting on top like she had nothing better to do. "You know," she started, her voice filled with unnecessary concern, "I hope you're planning to keep your yard in shape. We don't want property values dropping." Michael took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "I'll keep that in mind," he said, though he was already considering planting the wildest, most overgrown garden possible, just to annoy her. It was clear, Karen was going to be a challenge. But Michael had faced worse. If she thought she could ruin his dream home with her nosy, entitled behavior, she had another thing coming. Michael had always considered himself a patient man, but Karen, his nosy, overbearing neighbor, was pushing him to his limits. What had started as mild inconveniences, passive-aggressive comments about his lawn, unsolicited advice on how he should park his car, had escalated into outright invasions of his privacy. The first time he truly lost his patience was on a Saturday morning. He had just stepped outside to grab the newspaper when he saw her in his backyard. She wasn't trying to be sneaky. No, Karen was standing in the middle of his lawn, hands on her hips, scrutinizing his grass like a disapproving inspector. She muttered something under her breath before bending down to pluck a few weeds. Michael's stomach twisted in irritation. He took a deep breath before calling out, "Karen, what the hell are you doing in my yard?" Karen turned around as if nothing was wrong, her expression one of complete innocence. "Oh, good morning, Michael. I was just taking a look at your yard. It's looking a bit neglected, don't you think?" Michael clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. "That's none of your business. You can't just walk onto my property like this." She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I was only trying to help. Besides, good neighbors should look out for each other. Michael took a step forward, his patience thinning. Looking out for me would mean respecting my space. Karen let out an exaggerated sigh, clearly not taking him seriously, before strolling back to her house like she hadn't just trespassed. Michael exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Maybe this was just a one-time thing, he told himself. Maybe she got the message. He was wrong. A week later, Michael was in his kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee, when he suddenly felt an odd sensation, like he was being watched. His eyes flicked toward the window, and his breath caught in his throat. Karen's face was right there, peering in through the glass. His stomach lurched in shock. He nearly dropped his coffee mug as he whipped around and stormed toward the door. By the time he stepped outside, Karen was still standing near the window, completely unfazed. "Karen! What the hell are you doing?" His voice was sharper this time, his frustration bubbling to the surface. She blinked at him, her expression more annoyed than guilty. "Oh, relax, Michael. I was just seeing if you were home. You don't always answer your door, you know." Michael's jaw tightened. "That's because I don't want to talk sometimes. That doesn't mean you can spy on me through my window." Karen let out a dramatic huff, rolling her eyes. Young people are so sensitive these days. Michael could feel his blood boiling, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. Fighting with her wasn't going to get him anywhere. Instead, he turned on his heel and walked back inside, locking the door behind him. But the final straw, the moment that made his frustration boil over into full-blown rage, happened 2 weeks later. Michael had been working in his backyard when he heard a noise coming from his garage. At first, he thought maybe he had left the door open and a raccoon had gotten in. But as he approached, he froze. Karen was inside. She was rummaging through his tools like she owned the place, casually picking up a screwdriver and inspecting it as if she were at a hardware store. Michael saw red. He stormed inside, his voice a furious growl. "Karen! Get out of my garage!" She didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned to face him, looking more annoyed than guilty. "Oh, calm down. I just needed to borrow a screwdriver." Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. "You broke into my garage for a screwdriver? Are you insane?" Karen scoffed. "Oh, don't be ridiculous." The door was open. Michael was so angry he could barely think straight. His hands trembled as he pointed toward the exit. "Out. Now." She sighed dramatically, but she did as he said, though not without muttering something about how neighborly kindness was dead. Michael stood there, his heart pounding, watching her retreat back to her house like she was the victim. Enough was enough. The next day, he installed security cameras. If Karen thought she could invade his space without consequences, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Michael had thought Karen's behavior was just an annoying quirk of a nosy neighbor, something he could brush off. But as time went on, her actions became more aggressive, more invasive. What had started as passive-aggressive comments and unwelcome intrusions into his yard had turned into something much more unsettling. One evening, as Michael returned home from work, he noticed something strange. His mailbox was open, its contents missing. His stomach tightened. He knew he had received important documents that day. Had someone stolen them? Just as he was about to check his security cameras, a familiar voice called out. "Oh, Michael. I have your mail." Karen stood on her porch, waving a stack of letters in her hand. Michael clenched his jaw and marched toward her. "Why do you have my mail, Karen?" She shrugged as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, I saw the mailman drop it off, and I figured I'd save you the trouble of walking all the way down to the mailbox." Michael snatched the letters from her hands, his pulse quickening. "Karen, this is illegal. You can't take my mail." She let out an exaggerated laugh. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just mail. You should be thanking me." Michael stared at her, a cold realization settling in. she didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing. But it didn't stop there. A few nights later, Michael was jolted awake by a noise outside. His heart pounded as he grabbed his phone and crept toward the window. Peering through the blinds, his breath caught in his throat. Karen was in his driveway. It was past midnight, and there she was, standing beside his car, shining a flashlight at the tires. Michael's skin prickled with unease. He immediately turned on his porch light and stormed outside. "Karen! What the hell are you doing?" Karen jumped but didn't look the least bit guilty. "Oh, Michael. I was just checking your tires. I noticed earlier that one of them looked a little low, and I didn't want you driving on it." Michael could barely believe what he was hearing. "You broke onto my property, in the middle of the night, to check my tires?" She huffed, crossing her arms. "It's called being a good neighbor." Michael had had enough. "Karen, if you ever step foot on my property again, I'm calling the cops." She scoffed, muttering something about how people these days just don't appreciate kindness, but she finally walked away. Michael didn't sleep that night. But the final straw, the moment he realized Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor but someone who could be dangerous, came a week later. Michael had installed security cameras after the garage incident, but he never expected to catch what he saw that night. It was 3 a.m. when his phone buzzed with a motion alert. Groggy, he grabbed his phone and checked the live feed. And there she was. Karen was standing on his porch, staring directly into the camera. His blood ran cold. She wasn't knocking. She wasn't calling his name. She was just standing there, motionless, watching. Michael's breath came fast and shallow. His hands shook as he dialed 911. This wasn't just nosiness anymore. This was obsession. And Michael knew, without a doubt, that it was only going to get worse. Michael had always been a patient man. He believed in minding his own business, respecting his neighbors, and avoiding unnecessary conflict. But Karen had pushed him to his limit. For months, she had made his life miserable. She trespassed on his property like it was her own, peeked through his windows under the excuse of keeping an eye on things, and even stole his mail. When he politely confronted her, she played innocent, pretending she had no idea what he was talking about. When he set up security cameras, she called the police, accusing him of harassment. Michael had tried everything, talking, reasoning, even ignoring her in hopes she would lose interest. But Karen thrived on pushing boundaries, and it became clear that she wouldn't stop unless he made her stop. It was time to take matters into his own hands. Karen had a particular obsession with noise. She had called the police on him for walking too loudly in his backyard. She complained to the neighborhood association about his excessively loud wind chimes. The final straw was when she called the cops over his supposed wild parties, which was actually just him watching TV alone with the volume set to a reasonable level. Michael knew exactly how to use her paranoia against her. Late one night, he set up a Bluetooth speaker in his backyard, carefully hidden behind some bushes. Using a timer, he programmed it to play random noises throughout the night, faint whispers, the sound of dogs barking, the occasional deep, distorted laughter. Nothing loud enough to disturb the real neighbors, but just enough to get under Karen's skin. Sure enough, by the third night, Karen was out in her bathrobe, clutching a flashlight, stomping around with growing frustration. She called the police 3 times, but every time they arrived, there was nothing. Just silence. By the end of the week, Michael could see the exhaustion on her face. Dark circles under her eyes, her usual smug expression replaced with one of irritation and confusion. Asterisk good. Now she knows how it feels to be constantly disturbed, asterisk. Karen was a nosy thief. She had taken his packages more times than he could count, always pretending it was a mistake when caught. Michael decided to give her something she really wouldn't want to steal again. He ordered several boxes, each one labeled with exaggerated, suspicious warnings. Live insects, handle with care. Biohazard sample, refrigerate immediately. Confidential, FBI evidence. Each package was filled with harmless but deeply unsettling contents. One contained nothing but shredded newspaper and a single plastic spider. Another had an old circuit board, completely useless but covered in confusing wires. The best one? A box filled with packing peanuts and a single note. Asterisk smile. You're on camera. Tampering with mail is a federal crime. Asterisk. The moment Karen grabbed one of the packages, Michael watched from his security feed as she hurried inside, ripping it open like a greedy child. Then, a few moments later, she came storming out, looking around suspiciously, clutching the fake FBI-labeled package as if she had just committed treason. For the next few days, she avoided his porch completely. Michael knew that Karen lived for her reputation. She acted like the perfect neighbor, always pretending to be helpful and friendly, at least in front of people who mattered. But behind closed doors, she was a nightmare. So Michael decided to expose her. Over the months, his security cameras had captured everything: her trespassing, her peeking through his windows, her taking his mail, and even her yelling at delivery drivers for daring to park near her house. Instead of directly confronting her, he took a subtler approach. He compiled the best clips into a short, undeniable highlight reel of her worst behavior and sent it, anonymously, to the neighborhood association's email list. He titled it simply, **A concerned neighbor's footage of recent suspicious activity.*' **. The reaction was immediate. Within a day, Karen went from being a respected, if annoying, member of the community to a pariah. Neighbors who had once tolerated her now whispered about her behind her back. She could no longer hide behind her fake pleasantness when there was video proof of her actions. The final blow? A week later, she put up a for sale sign in her yard. Michael nearly laughed when he saw it. He had won. A month later, on the day of her move, Karen shot him a venomous glare as she walked past his house, arms crossed tightly. Michael, standing on his porch with a cup of coffee, simply smiled and raised his mug. "Safe travels, Karen," he said, voice dripping with satisfaction. She scowled, but for once in her life, she had nothing to say. As the moving truck pulled away, Michael took a deep breath. The air smelled cleaner. The world felt quieter. For the first time in months, his home was truly his again. It all started on a warm Saturday afternoon in a small, quiet town where nothing much ever happened. The sun was shining, kids were playing in the park, and the rhythm of everyday life carried on without interruption. That is, until a bizarre event shook the entire community to its core. The story of the infamous green bath began with a local man, Thomas, who had always been known for his eccentricities. He lived on the outskirts of town, and his odd behavior had made him a subject of gossip among the neighbors. People would often whisper about his strange habits, how he would talk to the trees, his obsession with unexplainable rituals, and his eccentric garden where bizarre, exotic plants grew. But no one expected what would happen on that fateful Saturday. Thomas had always been fascinated by old legends and myths, particularly those about ancient rituals that promised purification, enlightenment, or transcendence. One day, he became obsessed with the idea of a purification bath, a ceremonial cleansing that was said to open the mind and soul. But instead of a regular bath, he decided to take it to the extreme. He would bathe in a concoction of rare herbs, minerals, and a mysterious green liquid he had created through his own research. The moment the concoction was ready, Thomas went into his backyard, which was surrounded by thick trees and overgrown bushes. He filled a large wooden tub with the green liquid, which shimmered strangely in the sunlight, and climbed in without hesitation. The sight was strange, almost surreal. His neighbors, who were enjoying their weekend, noticed him from their windows and couldn't believe their eyes. Word quickly spread. People gathered on the streets, whispering in disbelief, as rumors about what was happening spread like wildfire. Was it a ritual? A strange form of protest? Or simply madness? As Thomas sat in the green bath, he began chanting in a language no one could understand. His eyes were closed, his face serene, almost as if he were in a deep trance. The scene was both mesmerizing and unsettling. His neighbors couldn't look away, but at the same time, they felt a deep sense of discomfort. Some even started to take pictures, and soon the entire town was talking about it. The authorities arrived shortly after. The local sheriff, along with a few other officers, approached cautiously. They attempted to get Thomas to leave the bath, but he was unresponsive, seemingly lost in his own world. After several attempts to communicate with him failed, they had to physically remove him from the tub. The aftermath of the green bath incident was nothing short of chaotic. News outlets picked up the story, and soon it became a viral sensation. People from all over the country started to flock to the small town, hoping to witness the aftermath of the strange event. Some were curious, others skeptical, and a few even claimed to have experienced spiritual awakenings from witnessing the spectacle. The townspeople, on the other hand, were left shaken and divided. Some were genuinely worried about Thomas's mental state, while others speculated that he had uncovered some sort of ancient truth. Thomas, for his part, refused to explain his actions, remaining cryptic in interviews. The green bath became a symbol of strange fascination, something that no one could quite understand but everyone felt compelled to talk about. It left the town forever changed, as the event sparked debates about privacy, mental health, and the limits of eccentricity. People who had once barely known Thomas now saw him as an enigmatic figure, someone whose actions had stirred a deep curiosity in them. For Thomas, however, the event was far from over. In the months that followed, he began to receive letters, invitations, and even offers from various people who wanted to know more about his ritual. But instead of basking in the newfound attention, he retreated further into his own world, preferring the solitude of his home. The green bath would become part of local legend, a story told for years to come. It would be whispered about during quiet conversations, debated in online forums, and perhaps, one day, become the subject of a book or documentary. But for the town, it was a reminder that sometimes, the strangest events have the power to change everything, and that the line between eccentricity and madness is thinner than most people realize. The world was changing, and it was becoming more apparent every day. In the quiet town where nothing much ever happened, something unexpected was about to transform it completely. What began as a small, seemingly insignificant event soon exploded into a phenomenon that no one could have anticipated, thanks to the ever-growing power of social media. It all started when an anonymous video surfaced online, featuring a local resident, Lily, who had a reputation for being somewhat of a recluse. The video was raw, unfiltered, and unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It showed her dancing wildly in her backyard, her expression full of freedom and joy, as if the whole world had suddenly fallen away. The video was no masterpiece by any standard, unpolished, messy even, but it captured something that resonated with people on a deeper level. At first, the video had only a handful of views. It was shared by a few curious locals who had stumbled upon it. But something about Lily's uninhibited dance, her unashamed embrace of self-expression, struck a chord with the online world. Within hours, the video went viral. Social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok picked it up, and before long, it was everywhere. People couldn't stop talking about it. It wasn't just the dance itself, it was the feeling of liberation, the rawness, and the authenticity that people craved in a world that often felt manufactured. Lily, who had always kept to herself, suddenly found herself thrust into the public eye. Her quiet life in the small town was no longer the same. Overnight, she became an internet sensation, a symbol of freedom and individuality. Memes were created, hashtags like #DanceLikeLily and #FreeSpiritLily trended for days, and millions of people across the globe found themselves captivated by the video. What started as a single, unintentional post turned into a movement. The explosion of attention was overwhelming for Lily. At first, she was confused, unsure how to process the wave of messages, comments, and new followers flooding her social media accounts. People from all walks of life reached out to her, telling her how her dance had inspired them, how it made them feel more comfortable in their own skin. Some even said they had found the courage to express themselves in ways they had never dared before. It felt surreal, like living in a dream where reality no longer held the same rules. But with this newfound fame came a darker side. As quickly as the video gained popularity, it began to attract attention from media outlets, bloggers, and influencers. They wanted to interview her, to dissect her dance, her message. What did it mean? Was she sending a deeper, spiritual message? Was she protesting something? The questions never stopped coming, and soon, Lily felt like she was being consumed by the very thing that had set her free. Despite the overwhelming attention, she tried to keep her feet on the ground. The whole thing felt like a blur. She didn't want to be a trend, a fleeting internet phenomenon. She wanted to be herself, unapologetically, without the pressure of public scrutiny. But the power of social media was undeniable. It was relentless, and soon, she found herself being branded as the social media icon or the inspiration for a generation. She never wanted any of this. She simply wanted to dance, to let go of everything that held her back. As the months passed, the impact of Lily's dance continued to ripple through the online world. People started creating their own versions of her dance, adding their unique twists, and the trend spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a viral moment, it was a cultural shift. Social media was no longer just a platform for connecting people, it had become a space for self-expression, for pushing boundaries, and for challenging societal norms. While Lily tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, she couldn't deny that her life had changed forever. The fame and attention were both thrilling and exhausting. She found herself questioning the very nature of social media, its power to lift people up, but also to tear them down. She had become a symbol of something bigger than herself, and yet, at times, she felt lost in the very thing that had catapulted her to stardom. The social media explosion had turned her life upside down. It was a reminder of how quickly trends could rise and fall, and how fleeting fame could be. But for Lily, it was also a reminder of the power of authenticity. In a world filled with filters and curated images, her raw, unfiltered dance had sparked something that no one could have predicted. And while the world moved on to the next viral sensation, Lily remained a symbol of something timeless: freedom, expression, and the courage to simply be oneself. In the end, the explosion of social media that began with one small dance served as a wake-up call to the world. It showed people that behind every viral moment, there was a person, someone with their own story, their own struggles, and their own truth. And as the digital age continued to evolve, it was clear that social media would never be the same again. Karen had always believed she could control the world around her. She'd spent years manipulating situations to suit her own needs, bending others to her will with charm, threats, or persistent complaining. But the world had a way of pushing back, and it wasn't long before Karen found herself at a crossroads, facing the consequences of her relentless behavior. It had all started innocently enough. A minor complaint here, a small issue there. But with each passing day, her sense of entitlement grew stronger. She demanded more than just her rights, she expected special treatment. When people refused to give in to her unreasonable demands, she fought back with complaints, ultimatums, and public outbursts. She had learned that by creating a scene, she could often get what she wanted. However, what Karen hadn't counted on was the resilience of the community around her. At first, people had tried to accommodate her. They apologized for the smallest things, gave in to her demands, and nodded politely as she vented. But eventually, the cracks in her facade started to show. Her behavior became too much to ignore. Neighbors started to share their frustrations, and word of her persistent bullying began to spread. One by one, people stopped tolerating her antics. Karen had reached the point where she no longer cared about making friends, she just wanted to be right. And so, she pressed harder. She went public with her grievances, aired her dirty laundry online, and used every tool at her disposal to discredit anyone who stood in her way. But instead of gaining allies, Karen found herself becoming more isolated. The backlash was swift and fierce. Social media erupted with people sharing stories of Karen's antics. Memes mocking her began to circulate, and soon she became a symbol of everything people disliked about entitled behavior. What had once been a minor annoyance had now become a full-blown spectacle. But the more Karen fought to maintain her control, the more she lost. Her attempts to rally support only made things worse. The community, once willing to extend a hand in patience, was now united in their rejection of her. Stores refused to serve her. Neighbors refused to speak to her. The isolation she had once caused others to feel now engulfed her. Karen had nowhere left to turn. It was at this point, the proverbial point of no return, that Karen began to realize just how far she had fallen. Her reputation had been shattered. The people she had once bullied and manipulated now turned their backs on her. The social circles she had tried so hard to control were closed off, and she was left standing alone in the wake of her own destructive choices. The loneliness that followed was suffocating. For the first time, Karen saw herself as others saw her, a bitter, self-centered person who had alienated everyone around her. And with that realization came a crushing weight of regret. But by then, it was too late. No one was interested in offering her a second chance. Her behavior had reached its peak, and there was no redemption in sight. Karen had pushed every boundary, crossed every line, and burned every bridge. There was no way back to the community she had once been a part of. As the days dragged on, Karen's life became quieter and more empty. She sat in her home, isolated from the world, realizing that the point of no return had passed. There would be no fixing what had been broken. No more arguments, no more complaints. Just the quiet echo of the life she had destroyed with her own hands. The consequences of her actions had become undeniable, and she had no one but herself to blame. In the end, Karen learned that pushing others to their breaking point often leads to one's own undoing. The power she had fought so hard to maintain slipped through her fingers, and all she was left with was the painful truth that she had no one to turn to, no one left to fight for her. The end of her path was marked by nothing more than the silence of her own making. In the face of Karen's increasingly toxic behavior, something remarkable began to happen within the community. What had once been a collection of individuals, each focused on their own lives, slowly transformed into a tightly knit network. The incessant demands, complaints, and confrontations from Karen, though frustrating, served as a catalyst for the people around her to come together in unexpected ways. At first, the reactions were defensive. People would grumble privately, roll their eyes behind her back, and try to avoid the chaos she stirred up. But over time, a shift occurred. Neighbors started to talk to one another more, sharing their experiences, their frustrations, and even their concerns about Karen's escalating behavior. It was as if the shared burden of dealing with her had opened their eyes to the strength in numbers. They began to form a bond, not just out of necessity, but out of solidarity. They found themselves speaking up more, offering each other support, and reassuring one another that they were not alone. The more Karen tried to isolate individuals or demand special treatment, the more the community responded by uniting against her actions. Groups formed online, where neighbors shared advice on how to deal with Karen's antics. They traded tips on how to handle confrontations, and more importantly, they reminded each other that they had a right to stand up for themselves. It was no longer about tolerating Karen's behavior for the sake of peace. It was about protecting their collective well-being, and that meant refusing to let her divide them. As time passed, the sense of unity only grew stronger. People who had previously kept to themselves now regularly checked in on one another. They celebrated small victories together, like standing up to Karen when she crossed a line or supporting each other during moments of stress. Karen's attempts to sow division only pushed them closer, and they became more proactive in ensuring that everyone felt heard and valued. Karen's isolation became more pronounced as she saw her tactics backfire. She tried to turn individuals against each other, but instead, it only galvanized the community. The shared understanding that they were stronger together gave each person the courage to speak out. They realized that no one had to suffer in silence, that there was power in standing up for what was right. And the community, as a result, became far more than just a group of people living in proximity to each other. It became a true support system, where kindness and mutual respect were the foundation. Neighbors offered help when someone was in need, whether it was picking up groceries for the elderly or lending a hand with household chores. People shared their stories, their fears, and their triumphs, creating a bond that was unbreakable. In the end, Karen found herself more alone than ever, while the community grew more vibrant, more connected, and more resilient. The very behavior that she thought would break them had, instead, forged a unity that was impossible to fracture. They were stronger, not in spite of her actions, but because of them. The bonds they had formed were a testament to the power of solidarity, and they stood tall together, no longer afraid of the noise and manipulation that had once caused them so much distress. What had begun as a fractured, quiet neighborhood was now a community that thrived on connection, mutual support, and the unwavering belief that together, they could face any challenge, no matter how difficult it might be.